Saudi Arabia's Global Future Investment Initiative Forum opens in Riyadh, focus on investment for growth.
Achieving wider health coverage for all. National Economic Council targets improved health facilities across the country.
INEC meets political parties ahead of November 16 governorship elections in Kogi and Bayelsa states.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall focus on the menace of illegal rehabilitation centers in the country.
It's not an issue of beating, malice, and harassment. It's daily. And we want the government to continue searching for such places and deal with them also.
Nigerians are still talking about the recent discovery of what appeared to be a replica of the slave trade era situation, with people in chains on both hands and feet, tortured, sexually molested, and even sodomized in what they called rehabilitation centers across the country.
Well, Rhoda, it's quite shocking that Nigerians were put in such dehumanizing conditions under the guise of rehabilitation and reformation. Victims as young as 5 years old were held captive for years, tortured, sexually abused, and starved in these illegal rehabilitation locations.
Well, the discovery and subsequent raid on such centers began when the police in Kaduna freed 190 inmates, including 77 children and 113 adults, from what was believed to be an Islamic school in Rigasa community of Igabi local government area of Kaduna State, and it's believed that 7 teachers were arrested at that particular location.
Absolutely, Rhoda. And just a few weeks later, at the Malam Nega Rehab Center in Rigasa, another center was also raided. Of course, this is the same community. This time, over 140 captives, men, women, and children were rescued, along with four foreigners from Cameroon and Niger republics.
And let's not also forget the horrifying images that emerged from the legal center in Zaria, where inmates had some appalling stories to tell. Another one of such centers was shut down in Zaria, with 11 inmates liberated and 4 teachers arrested by personnel from the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps. Similarly, 2 teachers were also arrested and 15 others freed during a raid in Yola, the Adamawa State capital, in one of such schools.
So far, Ilorin is the latest of such discoveries, where about 108 victims from an illegal rehab home were also rescued, this time by the police. In fact, we can go on and on as more centers are being exposed and then shut down following the president's directive for the police to find, raid, and free victims in all such illegal rehabilitation centers anywhere they might be.
Well, the good thing is also that the owners of these illegal rehabilitation centers have been arrested and brought before the law as we speak. The 6 suspects involved in the running of Malam Niga's Rehab Center in Rigasa in Kaduna State have been remanded in correctional facilities until the 6th of November 2019. Well, it turns out that the process of moving the case to the High Court has been the jurisdiction to hear the matter is still ongoing.
Well, with the alarming number of illegal rehabilitation centers discovered so far, how many of such places are probably still in existence where Nigerians are being tortured daily? Now, the centers claim to be certified to rehabilitate persons, but the conditions therein were obviously dehumanizing. And how was it possible? for the operators to have carried on freely, as it were, and for so long.
Also, what plans the state authorities have to set up, equip, and properly fund rehabilitation centers in the country? These questions and more will have answers in the course of today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. I'm Rhoda Anonam. We thank you for joining us.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Rhoda to also welcome you to the program. We are broadcasting, as always, on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. And we're right here at our Abuja headquarters studios. And in the course of the program, we have our complimentary segments. These include newspaper review of business and others. For now, let's join our other colleague, Chimaobi Watanaji, for the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Chimaobi.
Hello, good morning, Kingsley and Rhoda. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news. Now, the Future Investment Initiative, powered by the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, has opened in Riyadh. President Muhammadu Buhari is leading Nigeria's delegation to the Global Forum, which is focusing on utilizing investments to drive growth opportunities. State House correspondent Adamu Sambo reports that the forum will take a look at innovation and disruptive technologies towards addressing global challenges.
Glad President Muhammadu Buhari is engaging with the sovereign wealth funds, is engaging with the investment community among his several engagements. Last week he was in Sochi, Japan. He has been in many other places to mobilize investments for Nigeria, and is gaining traction.
And we believe that the President will deliver the message properly, and we hope that investments in critical areas in our country will be forthcoming from this initiative, because all global partners are here.
We hope the President will engage with the management of the Future Investment Fund to look into the possibilities of attracting funding.
Back home in Nigeria, there is great expectation that the country may be declared polio-free by June 2020. Now, that is, it has recorded 3 years without any case of polio. This will, however, depend on how well stakeholders are prepared to play their role. The National Economic Council at its 98th meeting deliberated on achieving a wider health coverage for all Nigerians by improving health facilities and campaigns. The council may also call for the involvement of the private sector and the efforts towards bringing an end to the smuggling of petroleum products across the nation's borders.
And stop transmission of circulating vaccine-derived polio virus. Despite the country's progress in RI and polio, other core primary healthcare center indices have been stagnated, and we are on track to achieve Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, by 2030.
The governors commended the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, called PBEX team, for the recent improvement of ranking of Nigeria in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business ranking 2020.
For the excess crude account, the balance is $324,035,695
And now to the National Assembly, where President Muhammadu Buhari has written to the Senate requesting the confirmation of 16 nominees as members of the Niger Delta Development Commission, with Pius Odubu as chairman, and the confirmation of 3 nominees as resident electoral commissioners of the Independent National Electoral Commission. The president also sought the confirmation of Justice J.T. Soho as Chief Judge of the Federal High Court and Justice Benedict Kinyap as President of the National Industrial Court of Nigeria.
Forward for confirmation by the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria the underlisted nominees for appointment into the NDDC board to occupy the positions indicated against their names. The appointment of the following 3 nominees as resident electoral commissioners of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC.
And the House of Representatives, in resumption of plenary, passed the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Amendment Act, which had been due for review for more than a decade. The importance of the bill, the lawmakers said, necessitated its speedy passage.
Provided in itself the need for it to be reviewed 15 years after commencement. It's about 26 years now. This part of the Principal Act has not been exercised.
And over the years, we know that at a point in time, the price of crude oil has even hovered over $100 at a point in time. But we have not leveraged on the advantage of that provision of the Act.
I think there are a lot more in other sectors that we need to again go into it so that we can generate a sufficient revenue for the interest of our own nation. The power sector is one very key and important place.
And still with the National Assembly, Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed says the over 900 million naira deducted from his ministry's 2019 appropriation made it difficult for the ministry to achieve its set goals. The minister stated this at his 2020 budget defense with the House Committee on Culture and Tourism.
Our inability to pay our dues as and when due were sometimes excluded from voting or being voted for in international meets. Even in UNWTO, where the entire continent looks up to us, Nigeria as a leader, we had to, from the sideline in Russia, dictate who becomes what, because we had not paid up our dues and we were actually disqualified from voting.
And the Buhari administration will continue to place premium on the supreme sacrifices of Nigeria's fallen heroes by providing the best support possible for their families and dependents. Secretary to the government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, stated this shortly after he was decorated with the Armed Forces Remembrance Emblem by executives of the Nigerian Legion.
So that in our subconscious, we are mindful of the fact that some people paid the price so that we can sleep with our 2 eyes closed.
It's only peace that can bring unity. It's only unity that can bring progress.
And vote buying, political thuggery, and the true independence of the Independent National Electoral Commission are some issues extensively discussed at a meeting in Abuja between INEC and political parties ahead of the November 16th governorship election in Kogi and Bayelsa states.
To advise them against hate speech, inciting statements, physical attacks on opponents, destruction of each other's campaign materials, and other sundry violations of the Electoral Act.
It is necessary that you get the right mandate from the people through the ballot box, and not through gun, not through intimidation.
And those are the news highlights for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Rhoda and Kingsley after this break. Thank you for watching.
Welcome back, and if you've just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Now, in the world of business, auditors have taxed on professionalism in a bid to complement the fight against corruption. Now, let's join Abdul Karim Surin for more details on this and other stories trending in the world of business.
Training and retraining of auditors in Nigeria is key to the actualization of the fight against corruption. This is why the 49th biannual conference of the body of federal and state auditors general in Abuja focused on seeking out ways to engage their services for the actualization of the transparency and accountability in the handling of government business. The Auditor General of the Federation, Mr. Anthony Aini, pointed out the need to squarely address the challenges facing auditors in general, both at the state and national level.
Expectedly now, in this standalone financial statement, it is required that you have separate audit opinion on the standalone financial statement before this standalone financial statement are even consolidated by the Accountant General of the Federation, and a consolidated financial statement prepared, which the Auditor General for the Federation will examine and report upon.
And now we head to the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, Abdul Karim Zurmi.
Thank you very much, Abdul Karim Zurmi, for the business package. Now it's time for newspaper review.
Our regular newspaper reviewer, Bayo Toyobi, as always, is here to give us more in-depth and more insight into our review this morning. Bayo, good morning.
Good morning, Rhoda. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, we have a couple of papers with us this morning. The Daily Trust, the Leadership, and of course, I think the Guardian. But first, let's begin with the Daily Trust. On the Daily Trust, just below the nameplate, it's the yellow fever kills 115 in Katsina local government. That's on page 6 of the Daily Trust. And Supreme Court hears Atiku's appeal against Buhari today. That's on page 13. Governors reject conditions for budget loan repayment. That's on page 8. And the big story, of course, that's the lead on the Daily Trust this morning. Federal government moves to regulate social media space with two rivals there. NUJ supports moves. CSOs kick, lawyers defer, and only anarchists will kick against plan. Those are the two riders to the lead story. Now let's just go take some stories at the foot of the paper, just below the picture story. Nigeria, Benin border closure, big blow to regional integration, says Ghanaian president. Of ads on page 10. Operation Positive Identification violates human rights, says Reps. That's on page 8. And finally, our economic growth plan at risk, says federal government. That's on page 4. Those are the stories on the front page of the Daily Trust this morning.
And taking a look at the front page of the Punch newspaper, first there is a different figure posted here above the nameplate. It says 18 die as yellow fever hits Katsina community.
This one
says
115.
115. But Punch is reporting here. 18 die as yellow fever hits Katsina community. Details can be found on page 40. Now, governors opposed bailouts 162 million naira monthly repayment plan. That's attributed to the federal government, with details on page 19. Above those headlines, CBN approves 19 billion naira for 9 cotton plants revival. That's page 29. And 2 earpieces beside the nameplate. Customs impounds 34 containers of rice. And APC rejects Vietnam's rice, insists on border closure. MTN files 9,100-page response in 3 billion naira suit against Malami. That's the Attorney General of the Federation. It is on 11. Now, the lead story comes with a kicker: positive identification. Stop army operation. And Reps, NBA, CDHR, that's the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, tell Buhari, show your ID card exercise begins Friday. That's the first rider. Second rider says, disregard fake alert. Military advises Nigerians. That's on page 2. Now, the 2 photographs there, they are related to the seizure by the customs of expired rice and drugs in containers. This was at the Tinkan Island port in Lagos yesterday. Now, flood sacks scores of Benue communities. Scores of communities in Benue. And then EFCC, ICPC to track Kogi and Bayelsa vote buying. That's according to INEC. Resign before you are caught. Castle tells Randy lecturers. That's page 19. 25 fleeing Kogi inmates recaptured, 97 missing. Poly lecturer arraigned for alleged job scam. That's page 5. And Bochi probes 41,448 ghost workers on state payroll. And Bayo, let me take leadership, a few of the headlines very quickly, and then it just reverts to you. Leadership newspaper, below the nameplate, Nigeria to cut oil production cost to $10 per barrel as National Assembly summons 17 oil firms over 81 billion naira debt. Army redeploys 9 generals. And the bailout here, as reported earlier from the Punch, is the lead story for the leadership newspaper. And also the story there on fake news, federal government goes tough on social media, dismisses allegation of gagging the press. Bayo.
All right, let's start with the Operation Positive Identification. The House of Representatives has passed a resolution calling on President Muhammadu Buhari to impress on the Nigerian Army to suspend Operation Positive Identification, which is planned by the Nigerian Army with effect from November 1 across the nation. The Army last month actually commenced Operation Positive Identification for persons passing through the northeast states of Adamawa, Borno, and Yobe. However, there are indications that this is to be extended nationwide. The House of Representatives minority leader moved the motion that such an exercise is not only a violation of human rights of individuals, but also setting the nation in a false state of emergency. The operation is to, according to the army, is to seek bandits, kidnappers, armed robbers, ethnic militia, as well as cattle rustlers across the country. So what it means is, therefore, if you are not a soldier, you probably are one of these identified persons they are seeking for, except you can provide an identity for that. And they have appealed to the commander-in-chief to call on the army to stop that. On the issue of social media, the Minister of Information has clarified that government has no intention of stifling the press, neither is it set to gag Nigerians. However, it is stressing and drawing attention to the danger of fake news and as well as hate speech. Nigerian Union of Journalists is in support of the move, while civil society organizations and some lawyers have, as usual, kicked against it. The NUJ says this is very necessary because sanity needs to be introduced into the social media because it is completely going out of control. Hate speech is not recognized as and should not be accorded freedom of expression. That is the position of the United Nations. Similarly, fake news is falsity, and therefore the two of them ought not to be accorded what is respected as freedom of expression. Freedom of expression has a lot of responsibility. If you are passing information, not only must that information be true and not false, but it also has to stay away from discriminating against persons based on either their sex, their gender, ethnicity, or patently discriminatory. Talking about states, 35 states have protested about the federal government's intention to recover 614 billion it gave out as bailout. The initial proposed payment was over 20 years, and by that, each state was to have a deduction of about 252 million for monthly for that period. However, the central bank intervened and spread it to over 30 years, which has brought it to about 162 million. Yes, the state governors are saying, yes, we want to pay, but we can't afford to pay 162 million without jeopardizing the activities in our states. Guess what? The Nigerian Golden Eaglets came up top yesterday, 3-2, beating Ecuador. Nigeria scored in the 5 minutes. Ecuador got an equalizer through an own goal from a rebound from the goal post. However, Ecuador was lucky when they got a penalty that, to my mind, is questionable because a defender was trying to clear the ball and an attacker deliberately put his foot in front of him, and in the process, he was down. And VAR awarded penalty against Nigeria, so it became 2-1. But in the 85th minute, Said was able to pull back and it became 2-2. And in the dying minute of the 89th minute, Said got his hat trick. And that tells you the resilience and the undying spirit of the Nigerian Golden Eagles team. They won their second match and they now have 6 points.
Yeah,
topping the
that's topping the group and, of course, qualifying for the next round.
Yes.
All right.
Just before we take the editorial,
yes.
You already made your comments on the positive identification that the military is set to embark upon beginning Friday, which is the 1st of November this year. I think it's a matter that is likely to cause quite some uproar if it's not handled because of its delicate nature. The purpose, of course, is to say, look, we want to be sure those who are around, we want to be able to sort out, if you like, isolate the alleged bandits or cattle rustlers, as you mentioned, or Boko Haram elements, or foreigners, who have no business being here. Well, as one of those entities I've said, I think is the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, this is not strictly the responsibility of the military. And if you were to do it in the Northeast, which is the main theater of operation, that would be understandable. But to now extend it to other parts of the country, one question that will arise almost immediately is, look, is the country under a state of emergency?
Yes, that is the deductions that has been made. In fact, at the House of Representatives, that was the argument, that the army is unilaterally declaring a state of emergency across the nation. It can, like you said, it can be understood if the intention was in the Northeast. Because the genesis was that they had dispersed the insurgents from Sambisa and they were scattered everywhere. And therefore, if we were passing through any of those 3 states, please have an identification because they are in the process of checking. That can be understood. But to extend it nationwide, it simply means every Nigerian is categorized as in that bunch of criminals, and except you can produce an identity to say otherwise, you have to.
Women who are over 80 years old, or farmers who are in the villages or in other localities and they move from the village to the urban centers, or persons who have no job or who are Nigerians, artisans, do they have forms of identification? I think it's something that we have to be careful about. Every day, you are not going to be stopped by the police, which is the law enforcement agency for civil matters, to say, look, show me your ID card, show me your ID card. We're not back to the apartheid era where you had a dumb pass, where you had to have a pass to be in a certain location. So I think that they have to be circumspect, in carrying this out. Nobody's saying that they shouldn't go about their functions on account of the fact that they've been drafted in to civil policing functions. But it is not the soldiers, not the police, or even immigration that will be demanding for ID card.
And my worry is sometimes, even when you meet the police and they ask you for a form of identification and you give them, you hear issues of, oh, this is not the proper identification, or probably you have a fake one. And that's your original identification.
You even have a national ID. They will tell you the date has expired and it's not valid.
Okay. All right.
Talking about,
let's quickly, before you take that, let's quickly take our editorial.
Yes.
And it's on the New Telegraph. It says, Executive Legislative Parley on 2020 budget. I'll just take the paragraph that's at the middle there. It says, we want to sound a note of warning to members of the National Assembly not to abdicate their constitutional responsibilities in budget process. They must realize that by presenting the budget to them at a relatively early date, the ball is now in the court of the legislature.
Yes. Before I go to that, Kingsley was talking about 80-year-old woman farmer.
Yeah.
There is a 96-year-old man, the oldest in Kiyi community, who got married to a 73-year-old woman, Rukaya, in Piri. And she has moved into the man's residence. Actually, the man was a widower. He lost his wife about 20 years ago. He married another woman, and the woman was taken away by her children. And he saw this other woman, Rukaya, 73, and they got married. The interesting thing is that his son, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren were all there as part of the ceremony. And the man, when he was visited, was having a honeymoon, enjoying a dish of tuwon dawa prepared by the bride. But however, the interesting thing and most challenging is the development in Uganda, where another man married an 83-year-old woman who is said to be a virgin, the only virgin, the oldest virgin in history, according to Guinness Book of Records. So, expect another miracle that helped Abraham and Sarah to have Isaac.
And of course, I'm sure you heard of the woman in Kenya. The woman in Kenya that married 3 husbands.
What do you call that?
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's been trending all week.
multi.
No, that's polyandry.
Polyandry.
Yeah, it's tolerated in some societies in Asia and parts of Africa, but of course it's prohibited here in Nigeria. Cultures frown at it. You know, it's on the other hand, it's one man, you know, and then a harem of wives. But you don't be surprised. There could be 1 or 2 isolated communities where this goes on.
I would not
yes, in Nigeria.
Women groups are saying if men can be polygamous, why would women be allowed to be polyandry? Polyandrous.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Well, let's see how you go. But the stories you just read, they are very interesting.
Yes.
With regard to persons finding love, either octogenarians or Nigerians. It's never too late. But it also speaks to the essence of companionship in human beings.
Yes.
In human beings, you know, gregariousness is one of the instincts of persons. That's why you and I are here. And that's why we have our viewers who are watching us. It's a way of connecting. And once you have that severed from you, which is why imprisonment is a terrible thing.
Yeah.
And it's solitary confinement.
Now the editorial before they rush us out. It is on the budget.
Yeah.
And what the editorial is saying that, yes, this is the first time we are having a convivial relationship between the executive and the legislature. However, that should not be used as an element to gloss over looking at the nitty-gritty of the budget. They must do a thorough job and give Nigerians the budget that they deserve. However, they must also be very critical about the challenges in the budget, particularly in the heavy weight of the deficit there, which is quite challenging for the economy.
All right, Bayo, thank you very, very much. We'll hope to see you again tomorrow morning.
All right, then. Look forward to seeing
All right,
you.
we'll take a short break now. And when we come back this morning, we're looking at the issue of the menace of illegal rehabilitation centers in Nigeria. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, you're welcome back. And if you've just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We're looking at the menace of illegal rehabilitation centers in Nigeria. And let's just quickly take this report that has been put together.
I was brought here because I smoke India hemp, cigarette, and I go to club. Sometimes I used to come back around like 12:1, but nothing more than that. I spent 5 years, 3 months. It's not an issue of beating, malice, and harassment. It's daily. Everybody must have to receive.
Now that the center has been abolished, how
we are very, very happy, and we want the government to continue searching for such places and deal with them also.
I came very sober, and when I got there, even me, I was even shocked at the kind of people I was mixed up with. Because I did my investigations in there, and I was told about 60 to 70% people there are mental. So then me, myself, I took it as a mental facility, not even a rehabilitation facility.
The place hasn't helped me anyway. They just be torturing me, doing bad things like sexual abuse with me, and the kind of beating they used to do in that place. It's not a help, and it will make you to be saying, I will not stop what I'm doing because of what they are doing to me in this place.
It seems like he has some sponsors on that ground. He has some sponsors because they abuse the unsensible ones with some food money and have homosexuality with them. And even some big men comes there and have sexual with the young ones and left in the night. And even if our parent comes, he won't allow them to see us. And if somebody's died, you won't know the burial ground that he takes them to.
Do you have incident of people dying?
Yeah, almost 5 this year.
We learned that you people are being put in chains.
Yeah, not even chains. There are some that were grabbed with these trailers, wheels, some with a big chain, and chain them with it. And there are some that he even put them in pillar. All these rain, mosquito, all the insects will be biting them. He has no care about it. He don't have any human sympathy at all.
Took you to the Gaza?
My brothers and my senior brothers.
Why?
So, they say I'm not a normal human being, just like that, because I'm smoking. And say I'm not well.
Smoking cigarette or hemp?
I smoke cigarette, I smoking in their head.
And other drugs, right?
No. What is happening there, I don't want God to show me that kind of lie. It's too much. The wickedness, the wicked thing is too much.
I was shackled. In the first place, I was shackled with chains on the leg. You know, where you are sleeping is not conducive. If you want to do anything, you have to take permission. Even if you don't do, they have to weaken you, they have to flog you.
If government wants to put end to things, firstly, this man register with the government. They give him the license to operate. What take the government not to regulate them? What make the government not to give them the condition of service? It's not doing this thing illegally. It have the approval, which before we brought our child here, we follow the rule and regulation. I cannot remember the register number F8. It was registered.
We're not stopping just as this. We will continually get all the people involved, free all the inmates. But before we unite them back to their families, we'll try as much as possible to offer them treatment, psychological support, and behavioral management.
All right, that's a very touching background there. We have guests with us here in the studios as well as from our network centers. Rhoda?
All right, we have with us here in the studio, I'd first like to introduce Ngalali Ajuri. He's a Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. Thank you for joining us, Ajuri, this morning.
Thank you and good morning.
Good morning. And also we have here in the studio Abdurrahim Okbotu Shaibu. He is the Director Legal, NAPTIP. Good morning and thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning.
Okay.
We have in Lagos, we have our DCP, Frank Mba, who's in our Lagos Center. He's the Force Public Relations Officer. DCP Mba, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Nigerians. It's a pleasure always to be on this platform.
Thank you very much, DCP Frank Mba. In Kaduna, we have Suleiman Dabo. He's an honorable member of the Kaduna State House of Assembly. Thank you very much for being a part of the program this morning.
Good morning.
All right.
And also, I think...
we'll have other guests who will join us later. That will be from Kano, I believe, from our network center in Kano. Well, let's begin this conversation, Rhoda, by first going to Deputy Commissioner of Police, Frank Mba, who is the Force Public Relations Officer. DCP Frank Mba, well, a number of the so-called rehabilitation centers have been busted in different parts of the country, and literally hundreds have been freed from the dehumanizing conditions in which they were found. What exactly are we dealing with here? Is it illegality gone horribly bad, or we just had illegality right under our noses? Everybody walked past.
Kingsley, it is actually a very complex scenario. It is a combination of both, because some of the rehabilitation centers, and I'm using that word in quote, will actually brandish papers that suggest that there was a feeble attempt at trying to legitimize the whole bulk of illegitimate activities that are actually going on there. But the bulk of them actually never made any attempt to even register, because they assume that they're actually running something that is quasi-religious in nature, something that is traditional in nature. And some of them that we've spoken to actually try to draw an analogy with healing homes that you find in some parts of the country. But the truth is the magnitude of the illegalities that are going on in those homes are actually mind-boggling, even to us as security agents. And in my over 2 decades of policing, I've never seen such concentration camps, in quote again, or where you have that kind of abuse going on. It's not just a case of the abuse of the rights of the inmates. It also, for me, it is not just a human right issue. It is also a crime issue. It is a public health issue. Because if you see most of the persons that have come out from there, you could also see that if not that some of these interventions were made, clearly they were already on the path of losing their health, both physically and mentally. It's also a social issue. So it's a very complex scenario. Incidentally, when we spoke to a couple of the parents or the guardians that took their wards there, some of them were either absolutely ignorant of what is happening there, in the sense that, or they have just partial information about what goes on there. Because one of the strategies of the owners of those homes is that the persons whose wards are there are not even allowed to go into the homes itself. So when you come visiting the home, what they simply do is they bring out the young person to you, and you are made to speak to the person under the tree or at a holding bay. So at the end of the day, a lot of the people who have voluntarily, as it were, taken their kids or their wards into those homes have no idea what actually goes on there. They have no idea the kind of squalor that are found there. They have no idea the kind of subhuman conditions that these inmates are actually living in. And so at the end of the day, they have just incomplete information about what is going on there. And we also discovered again that there are 2 kind of persons that are actually taking their wards there. There are those who genuinely trust the capacity of these homes to reform their wards. And those are the people that when they take their people there, you see them visiting virtually, either every week or every month or twice in a week or once every two weeks, because they believe sincerely and genuinely that they are trying to help their own. But there are some that what you simply see from the interaction is that for them it is an escapist route. They simply have this young man or young woman that they've lost control of, again arising from their own parental failure, and then they feel that these homes will provide a kind of substitution for parental roles. But for us, that is again is an abdication of one's responsibility. So these are people who have failed in actually providing appropriate parental care for their kids, and they are looking for an escapist way. They are looking for a relief. And then they end up with these pseudo-parental arrangements. And for them is good riddance to bad rubbish. They just drop off the child there, pay a lump sum of money, and then they walk away. And at the beginning of this investigation, some of us thought probably we were actually progressing on the hypothesis that this probably was driven by poverty. But when we look at the caliber of some of the persons there, we look at the amount of money that some of their parents either paid in bulk or paying instrumentally to maintain their wards there, then you discover that this is purely not a system that is driven by poverty on the part of the parents. As a matter of fact, the persons that are running those homes are capitalists, because they make a lot of money running those homes, and they are not rendering those services as pure charity. And for me, any reformation attempt that is not built on love, that is not built on care, that is not built on rule of law, that is not driven by real passion, cannot succeed. Even a doctor, if you go to our hospitals, doctors and nurses that are distant, that distance themselves from what they do, and are devoid of emotion or lack that requisite emotion and love and care for their patient, they will never do well. The same thing with a police officer who is also expected to take care of persons. And if you do that and you don't have that love and you are not able to know that there should be a drawing line, then you will never go far with your profession. So for me, it is a major problem.
All right, thank you very much, DCP Frank Mba. Lots and lots of issues you have, talking points you have raised this morning that we'll continue to talk about here. But then I'd like to bring in Ngelale Ajuri from your reporting angle. I know that you have had to deal with this issue. What do you make of all of these illegal centers that are being busted?
Thank you very much, Rhoda. First of all, let's acknowledge the origins of what we now are referring to as illicit or illegal rehabilitation centers. Originally referred to as Gidan Mari. In fact, in Hausa, Mari refers to an actual physical restraint, a kind of a chain. You know, there was the idea over the course of history that you can essentially eliminate social vices by bringing troubled individuals or mentally disturbed individuals into these centers, and by using kinds of physical restraints and at sometimes even physical discipline in the way of beatings, etc., that you can also simultaneously now kind of inculcate the core principles of Islam, essentially, to try and correct the individual's path toward maybe a more proper orientation for societal development, etc. Now, what has happened over the course of time is that we've seen a steady evolution from these rehabilitation centers operating as rehabilitation centers into this kind of environment that has now become pervaded by instances of sexual abuse, various forms of exploitation, even torture in some instances. And that is now where the authorities are now finally getting involved over the course of the last few years. But I think we have to look at the system. What is it about the system that needs to be changed? I think, first of all, let's acknowledge that there's been a lack of participation on the part of public actors in the operation of these rehabilitation centers. And so, for example, instead of a situation where what we have now, where, you know, maybe community leaders and in some cases traditional leaders are being consulted in terms of the operation of these centers, how can we now get you know, state actors more involved, state governors, local government officials more involved in the oversight of some of these centers? How can we also more effectively distinguish between these rehabilitation centers, as it were, and, say, the Al-Majri system of education? Because we know that there's been a kind of blurring of the lines where, you know, parents have brought their children, for example, into centers believing that this is a safe alternative undergoing, you know, the kinds of Al-Majri education curricula, only to find out later that some of these centers that they believe are safe for their children are kind of are engaging in some of the same activities that we see in the rehabilitation centers, with sexual abuse and other forms of torture. So ultimately, how do we, you know, essentially distinguish between the two, and how do we also get state actors involved in a way that is sustainable, in a way that ensures oversight and in a way that protects our young ones and, of course, those who may be legitimately affected by mental health and substance abuse issues. And I think even within the formal system of corrections, there are a series of reforms that I hope to discuss over the course of the program. President Muhammadu Buhari has been very clear in his position that he does not in any way condone or authorize the kinds of activities that we have seen from these illegal rehabilitation centers, and he has put forth a series of measures that this administration believes will check some of these negative trends, and we'll get into that.
All right, Jury, thanks a lot. We'll return to you, as you said. Let's go over to Honorable Suleiman Dabo, who is with us from our Kaduna Network Center. He's a member of the Kaduna State House of Assembly. We introduced him earlier. Honorable Dabo, tell us something. I mean, what do you know about these so-called rehabilitation centers? And in particular, address the point raised by Ajuru Ngelale, the fact that there might be either some similarities or dissimilarities between the Almajiri system and these illegal rehabilitation centers that have not been exposed.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'm in a very good position to speak about the subject matter because if you remember what happened in Kaduna, in Rigasa area, after the rescue of about 147 inmates, thereafter I think some were equally rescued in Zaria, which is within the purview of my jurisdiction, or rather legislative function. That is my constituency, to be precise. In Zaria, I think in Liman Chinkona and Marmara, which is Liman Chinkona is a ward that I represent. I represent 6 wards in Zaria City constituency. Now, I think the whole narrative of rehab to some extent is misconstrued, because in dealing with this issue we have to be very, very careful. Why I'm saying this, because we have to look at the historical antecedents of the emergence of these particular centers. Now, I'm slightly above 40 years. While I was growing up as a child, I used to know that there were a lot of rehabilitation centers even within Zaria City itself. But the rehabilitation centers that we see today are totally different from the rehabilitation centers that are obtainable, or rather that used to be before. Now, we are talking about illegality. The illegality comes in when we talk about the issue of legal instrument. That is because most of these centers are operating without any backing from the government, without registration, without being recognized by law. Now, we have to get it right. What do I mean? In Zaria City, now, in trying to get it right, the issue of people that I'm representing today, a lot of them are looking at it. Government is coming in to outrightly stop a system whereby we take our kids or our wards for rehabilitation or for recovery. They are coming overnight to do it, which of course there are a lot of things happening there that are very bad. People are being subjected, like the rehabilitation center in Zaria. I think about 3 people died. It was reported by the what do you call him? The national, one of the officers from the National Civil Defense, whatever. Now, what I'm trying to say in essence, they are operating illegally. They have a history, but what is being obtained today is totally different from what used to be before. Now, I'm trying to manage the people, because these are local people. It's a local community. The government, in coming in, we have the Ministry of Human Services and Social Development. They have to come in, because in one of the reports that you put before starting the program, I think somebody was mentioning what will stop the government from liaising with these centers, ensuring registration, ensuring that they have an operational guideline in such a way that the practice will be recognized by the law, will be it will be humanly possible. Now, coming to the issue of the psychology of the people, which is very, very important in dealing with this issue. A lot of people would love to say, till today, they still have this kind of mindset. A lot of people would love, I'm not talking about the traditional people within my locality, would love to say, okay, now, I have a child who is a recalcitrant child. He doesn't listen to me. He goes out in the night. He goes and drinks. He steals. Maybe some of them, possibly, I don't know, they are into robbery. Okay, the best thing to do is let me take them to this rehab center. But ideally, in the global concept of rehab center, you will see that the definition is about recovery or restoring an individual who is an addict to drugs or alcohol. Now, the concept of rehab in the local communities is about a person who has high level of immorality related to stealing, robbery, or even this kind of mobs that move around. So the parents, if they are no more comfortable with the attitude of their child, they will say, okay, let me take him to rehab center and let him be rehabilitated. But now, if we are looking at it differently, because, for example, let me just quickly give an example with what happened in 2013 in Egypt, in the neighborhood of Muqattam, where they had even this spark of controversy regarding rehabilitation centers even over there. In 2013, there was a case in the neighborhood of Muqattam in Egypt, where one of the inmates was tortured, and eventually he died. And now there was this controversy all over that there were a lot of private rehabilitation centers, and a lot of people have been tortured, and a lot of people died over there. And they said, okay, the government has to come in. And in the long run, what happened? In the long run, what they did was to try as much as possible to register some of these rehab centers to ensure that they have the legal operational framework within the society. I think this is very important. This is very important to know. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Suleiman Dabo. But still staying with you, I remember that one of the centers that the governor of Kaduna State, Governor Nasiru El-Rufai, visited said that they were certified and they had papers to prove that they were certified. Who certifies such centers?
I'm not the spokesman of the governor, but I can say that if as much as possible a center is certified, there is also the issue of responsibility of the government in terms of monitoring and evaluation. Because even if you certify a center, we already have a Ministry of Human Services and Social Development. As much as you certify a center, you equally have the responsibility to monitor and ensure that what they are doing it the right way as spelled out by law. Now, as a member, or rather, as the legislative chamber, we are trying as much as possible to see how we can look into the issue thoroughly, because you see, what people don't know, a lot of these rehabilitation centers are prevalent in local communities. A lot of them are there. But in trying to deal with the situation, the government must be extra cautious. They must be extra careful, because in the event of going contrary to the expectations of the people, because if you are dealing with human beings, you have to be careful, especially local human beings. Because a lot of people are seeing some of these things coming overnight as the government is trying to be more or less like an autocratic democracy, because this is something that has a history in our traditional communities and societies. So if you come overnight and say, okay, I want to blow it out overnight, what they are doing is not right, no doubt about it. They are maltreating the children of a lot of people, but the government have to. You see, you made a point regarding Al-Majiri education, the Al-Majiri system, the connection. You threw that question to me. Let me just quickly make a point. Recently, I organized a summit in Zaria City, my constituency, in trying to deal with this issue of Al-Majiri system of education. What did I do? What I did was, because the government has been trying to say, okay, no to Almajiranci, even though itself Almajiri system has been misconstrued to, because the moment you mention Almajiri, somebody will think of street begging. Almajiri is a system of learning Islamic education. But begging is an entirely different thing. Going on the street, that is what we call bara in Hausa. Now, what I did was to bring the stakeholders, the primary and secondary stakeholders within my constituency, to come and discuss, deliberate, debate these issues with a view to profiling solutions on the way out. So we came up with solutions regarding this. So what we need to do is to go back to the grassroots, discuss with the stakeholders, bring out solutions, because if government will sit down within the confines of the government house, discuss, drink tea, and then take a decision on behalf of the people on sensitive issues like this, I don't think we are going to make any. Now, additionally, or rather finally, a very important point that I want to make, because I don't know whether I may have the time to make that point, is that at the beginning of this issue, when the narrative came to play just recently in the media, a lot of media were saying illegal Islamic rehab centers. I think this is mischievous, is unacceptable. There is nothing Islamic related to rehab centers. Nothing Islamic. We need to get this correctly. There are a lot of Islamic centers rehab centers in Kaduna and other parts of Nigeria, especially in the local communities. I believe that there should be some academics that must have conducted a lot of research regarding this very issue. If we can go deep into to the root, we'll find out a lot of things. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Suleiman Dabo. We will return to you in the course of the conversation, and you'll have time to speak on some other perspectives on this matter. Let's come back to our Abuja studios. Abdul Rahib Opotu Shaibu, who is the Director of Legal Services at the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons. Is there a NAPTIP perspective to the rehabilitation centers with their squalid conditions and the kind of criminal activities that have gone on there?
Thank you so much for your question. Very well, NAPTIP actually has a lot of role to play in this particular scenario. A lot has been said by the initial contributors, and very much enlightening as well. Whenever there is lack of proper procedure in doing certain things, either to be regulated or to be monitored, the criminal cartel or criminal gang takes over. And that is what we are seeing right now. Just like in the issue of organized crime, where human traffickers, take victims from their locality to the city center or from Nigeria across the country. That is what we're also seeing in this kind of rehabilitation centers. Because those who are operating it, like the last speaker actually wanted to conclude, are those who take advantage of the loophole in the system, and they've tried to, take it to their own advantage. Now, all these victims found there are vulnerable. Once they are in these rehabilitation cells, they are no longer in control of their life. Their freedom is lost. Everything is gone, and they do whatever they like to them. And that is why we are hearing the cases of all those abuses. They subject them to sexual abuse, they subject them to labor abuse, and they're subjected to all kinds of abuses, and nobody is controlling them. So, as far as we are concerned, a lot of activities carried out there has element of human trafficking, because human being is being exploited, and we shouldn't allow that to happen. So we are trying to work with all the state government, and what the federal government has done is very, very, very enviable, that these centers need to be closed down. And for us, these victims should not just be rescued. We want to have access to them. We have been actually trying to talk to the police. We're working with them basically. Now we need to collaborate anytime, because over 60 of those victims found there are children. Over 60% So we need to have access to those children to be able to interview them. So all those criminalities that have taken place need to be addressed. For us, we need to take someone to court so that we can have somebody prosecuted to serve as deterrent, that this kind of menace should not be allowed to take place in our communities.
I just wondering, did NAPTIP advert its mind to this kind of atrocities before the stories came into the open a couple of weeks now?
Oh, honestly speaking, we never ever believed that such, what just like Francis Umba's mission, concentration camps exist. Because we are not everywhere across the country, but we work with the Nigerian police, we work with the Nigerian immigration, and we work with other law enforcement agencies to assist us with information. And for us, it is very, very appalling, very horrific, and very, terrible to find such things taking place. So we are going to take action with our own partners to see that all of these victims are rescued, from this particular exploitative situation. They are being exploited, basically, because, like mentioned by the other speaker, there's heavy money involved. They are making huge money on this kind of thing, and that is the characteristic of human traffickers. To use other human beings as chattels to make their money. They're into business, big time business, and we should not allow that to happen.
Okay, I'm wondering. Shaibu, yes, you're a lawyer, and DCP Frank Umba in our Lagos Network Center is also a lawyer. Yes. So let's pause here and then direct the question to Frank Umba, First Public Relations Officer in Lagos. Now, in terms of trying to get a panoramic view of what is happening with regard to rehabilitation centers, whether legal or illegal, can we, perhaps reference this against the background of the Children and Young Persons Law in existence in states of the Federation, where, for instance, there's provision for remand homes, for juvenile offenders. And then you also have the traditional system for taking care of persons who have mental issues. And this is more common in the South. And of course, if you were to raid those locations, you would also probably find evidence of torture and so on and so forth. Perhaps it's no longer happening, but in the past, persons would say, look, beat the devil out of a mad person, to get the person sufficiently killed. I recall, there was during the Adini era, 1986, one of the persons who was put on trial, of course, got freed by the tribunal, because the alibi was that, look, he wasn't a gun runner, but that he was the one, according to him, he was treating mad people, and that you don't use gun and bullets to treat mad people. But, of course, there was torture. So, what are we saying here? Is it a countrywide phenomenon that, say, in the north now you have this, open menace, as it were, but in the south, you probably would also have remand homes, official or unofficial, and then traditional healing homes for mentally challenged or mentally ill patients?
Kingsley, there is a whole lot of nexus between what is happening in some of these homes and actually how they amount to infractions on Children and Young Persons Act and the laws you've just mentioned. The truth is that even at the beginning of my speech, I did make reference to the fact that in the southern parts of this country, you will also find some healing centers and deliverance centers, particularly with some of the churches, some of the white garment churches, for example, where, just as you say, they believe that you can, in the course of delivering someone from being someone who is possessed by demons, you can actually flog the demons out of them. But again, we have had to deal with this in the past, and we have had to make arrests in the past. We've had to prosecute some persons in the past. With what we are discovering in the northern part of this country, we are also expanding our searchlights to all the nooks and crannies in the southern part of the country. For us, particularly in the Nigeria Police Force, the entire country, the entire length and breadth of Nigeria is just one single constituency for us. And so our operational jurisdiction covers the entire length and breadth of the country. And so what we're doing in the northern part of the country, we're also doing so in the southern part of the country. And when we make those discoveries, eventually we'll let Nigerians know. But the challenge really is that these centers are very opaque the way they operate, and sometimes they actually operated with active connivance and collaboration, and some very tacit, if not very clear support of the locals, like Honorable Dabo said. And that's why in dealing with it, we must adopt very holistic approach. Beyond core law enforcement approaches, we must also adopt multidimensional approaches in dealing with this menace. And for me, one of the things we need to do, drawing from even what the Honorable have said, is the fact that we may not even be able to just legislate them out of extension per se. So what we need to do is look at this center. Since it has got a long history, I deliberately avoided discussing the evolution of these centers because I'm not an expert in matters of that. I'm not an expert in discussing that subject matter. So I clearly and carefully avoided dabbling into it. But since it is clear to us that they've got a long history, and a whole lot of people in some parts of this country, some believe in the efficacy of this, even though they are not scientifically verifiable. There are no empirical evidence to actually attest to the efficacy. But what we need to do, for me, is to come up with a set of laws, a set of regulations, a set of rules that will guide the establishment, the operation of these centers. And we must also make a very clear distinction between mental health rehabilitation center and just behavioral rehabilitation center. There are two different things. Issues that have to do with mental health must be left entirely for psychiatrists and psychologists, while the issues that has to do with dealing with a child that is delinquent, a child whose behavioral pattern is considered anomic by his parents or guardians, should also be treated differently. It will be injurious to put the two of them together. If we can come up with a set of legal processes, make the processes transparent, and have government agencies, government actors that will continuously supervise the operation of these centers and make sure that the operational models conform with a set of and have objectives clearly set and defined for them. And then also get agencies like NAPTIC, agencies like the police, agencies like the NDLE to be involved. You can't be talking to me about rehabilitating somebody who is abusing substances, and then you are not getting NDLE. NDLE has got departments that are actually dealing with such centers. There are also civil society groups that have capacity to train some of this person. So if there's going to be a convergence of learning, Islamic scholarship, and then a deliberate attempt at character reformation, then we must define their curriculum clearly and work collaboratively to achieve this set of objectives for ourselves. But like I've said, core law enforcement approaches alone might not be able to deal with this menace, considering the kind of tacit support, considering the kind of silence, connivance, and collaboration that they have amongst the people.
All right, thank you very much, DCP Frankenba. I'll come back to you very briefly just before we let you go. But then I'd like Ajuri Galal to also speak to some of the issues that you have raised. Ajuri, let's not forget the fact that really we're dealing with one issue here, and that's the fact that some of these persons there are believed to abuse substances majorly. And then what comes to mind is some of these illegal centers are probably doing very well because most of the state-owned rehabilitation centers are not working. Most states across the country don't have rehabilitation centers, and even the ones that have are poorly funded.
I'm quite happy that you framed the question in that manner, because that's actually a major problem that needs to be addressed. First of all, let's acknowledge an important point that was made earlier, but I want to add a bit of specificity to it. It is true that the Child Rights Act of 2003 has not been fully adopted in many northern states. And that's important within the context of this conversation, because that provides the framework through which we can now ensure that some of the abuses that are being perpetrated in some certain Al-Majri facilities, as well as some of these rehabilitation centers, are continuing to be perpetrated. So that's going to be something moving forward that I think will need to be looked at by governments within that region. And indeed, enforcement is actually an issue around the country, but the formal adoption and the implementation is something very important in the region. Let me also say that to your point about the absence of, kind of formal rehabilitation infrastructure around the country, it's absolutely true. What we have generally seen is, as a result of kind of the stigma that's been placed upon mentally disturbed, or in some cases individuals who are suffering from the effects of drug abuse, has created a scenario in which families tend not to report some of these activities, and they tend to look for informal means of settling some of these situations. The DCP mentioned, the use of prayer, the idea that you can physically beat some of these, issues out of a person. These are some of the challenges that we currently face, and how we resolve that, I think, are multiple-fold. One is we need to reprioritize, make some adjustments within our health care institutions to say that it's not just about what we would consider, anatomical issues around, the heart, the liver, the brain, physical kinds of ailments with physical healing, that we need to take a very serious look at mental health and make sure that even within our public healthcare facilities, as well as the private healthcare facilities, that we're making concerted efforts to employ certified psychiatrists and psychologists to ensure that these services are made available at an affordable rate. That's one. And on the other end, we also have to ensure that our state governments begin to prioritize social development centers, rehabilitation centers. If you go to other parts of the globe, you would find that there are specific centers that are really preventative in nature, where people can talk about the temptations they're facing, about the issues they have. We don't really have that infrastructure. And even within our formal system, it was just in August when President Muhammadu Buhari signed into law a very important reform bill that essentially is going to transform what was the Nigerian prison service into the Nigerian correctional service. And it lays out a series of steps that are now going to be taken, aside from the physical infrastructure, where we're building brand new prisons across geopolitical zones of about 3,000 inmate capacity to kind of off-take some of the overpopulation we're seeing in our traditional prisons. We're also making institutional adjustments to ensure that we prioritize rehabilitation with industries, with vocational and educational centers, so that people are coming back into the society the way that they should, and so that families who are suffering from, cases of mentally disturbed loved ones, etc., can feel comfortable reporting those cases to the police, so that they can go into correctional facilities as opposed to some of these illegal rehabilitation centers.
All right, Ajuri, thank you very much. Incidentally, on Good Morning Nigeria in the past, we had taken on the subject matter of drug and substance abuse, whether it was codeine or whether it's glue or the droppings of lizard or other reptiles. We've had NDLA officials, we've had experts, we've had persons who have also overcome all of this. But one issue that was always a bit of a challenge has to do with the availability of formal rehabilitation centers. We've discussed it on Good Morning Nigeria. Today, we were actually expecting a former Director General of the NDLEA to be with us. He's also a member of the Presidential Committee on Drug Abuse, but unfortunately is not able to be with us on this program today, which is what is taking me back to DCP Frank Uba. That's probably our last question for him before we sign him off. There is a Presidential Committee on Drug Abuse. We know that there are many perspectives to dealing with this. You have also talked about the role of other agencies. Drug abuse, they'll be talking about demand and supply. But here is an issue that has to do with rehabilitation and then having to knock on, if not break down, traditional walls involving reformation and rehabilitation. One challenge that we have also identified in our polity is the fact that agencies or institutions tend to work in silos. Now, with what is staring us in the face on account of what has been busted from the so-called rehabilitation centers, what in your opinion would be the best way to go to ensure that there are all proper linkages between the police, NAPTIP that is here with us, NDLEA, and in particular, the social welfare departments, such as Ajuri has said, of the state governments. I mean, not just sufficient to issue licenses or certificates, and then these guys are left to operate on their own steam, as we have seen.
Kingsley, the truth really is nature abhors vacuum. As long as the state actors, as long as the governments, both at the federal, state, and local government levels, leave the space for rehabilitation, for reformations unattended to, or not sufficiently attended to, we'll continue to have persons either genuinely consigned or charlatans who are masquerading as if they are genuinely consigned, trying to take over the space. If you remember the last discussion we had on this platform, when we talked about baby factory, we all agreed during that panel discussion that the government must make provisions, must provide interventions for fertility treatments. As long as you don't have those kind of intervention, persons desperate about having children will always go, they would desperately seek any way at all to get those children. And that's part of the things that are driving the baby factory syndrome. So just the same thing you've just raised now, the linkages between demand and supply. If there are parents out there desirous of this kind of services, and we are not providing them an opportunity, we are not providing them a platform, we are not providing them those services, they will desperately, sometimes genuinely, sometimes out of love for their kids, seek out these services from anywhere. And that's when this kind of reformation homes will take advantage of them. So for me, we must take the space out of these people. We must go into this space, dominate this space, provide these services, come up with new legislations, come up with new guidelines, build linkages between the operations of the police, NAPTIC, NDLE, the social welfare services of the state government, and again, with the new part that the correction services are taking, they also must be incorporated. And then we find a way of developing a paradigm shift that will begin to provide these services in very scientific manner, provide these services with government support, and sometimes subsidize these services by government, so that we can take the space back to ourselves and then drive it in a normal way, drive it in compliance with rule of law, drive it in compliance with international best standards, drive it in compliance with human rights practices that are obtainable everywhere in the world.
Thank you very much, DCP Frank Mba. As always, we thank you for your thoughts and time. But just before I let you go, I know usually we'll take you from our studios here in Abuja, but we're taking you from Lagos this morning. So what's happening in Lagos?
Yes, we've been in Lagos since the beginning of the week. It is actually a retreat and conference for senior police officers of the Nigerian Police Force taking place here in the commercial city of Lagos. We had the opening ceremony on Monday. We had the President and Commander-in-Chief represented by the Vice President of this country, Minister of Police Affairs, the IGP, and so many other dignitaries and governors who are in attendance. And it's been a very wonderful time here. We're just here to come up with new ways of policing Nigeria better and improve our capacity in doing so.
All right. Thank you very much, DCP Frank Mba, and we hope to have you back in Abuja soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your thoughts and time this morning. All right, we'll take a short break now, and when we come back, just a reminder that we have tweets from our viewers, and we'll take them when we come back. But then you can still be a part of this conversation if you tweet at us at our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. Let's take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
All right, welcome back, and it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As my colleague Rhoda indicated, we have a number of tweets that have come in. We'll quickly go through those tweets now and then return to our guests. Cecilia Okoroma has this tweet. The major issue is that Nigerians don't speak out when they see evil being perpetrated around them. What kind of rehabilitation centers are those where young, able, sane persons are changed? I'm sure they are captives who have been kept, brainwashed, and eventually trafficked abroad. And
Addison Finit says, though these rehab centers may look undesirable, the impacts they make on some children are good, but the illegality factor always plays out at some point. Maybe government should involve some of them in a dialogue to ascertain their usefulness. I've seen a child who is a potential armed robber that was changed to a normal being by one of these centers. Government should engage some of the illegal rehab centers, license them, and provide a mode of operation for them.
Well, this is coming from Akejo Olagbaju, and says that this is the failure on the part of state and local governments. Rehabilitation centers are managed by governments as best practice to ensure that inmates' rights are respected. We have a Ministry of Social Welfare, and the states should take up the responsibility.
And this one is from Francis Obi. He says, they came due to the demand which the government could not satisfy. There's a need to study each of them and then upgrade them, and the government should now open more. Nature does not have a vacuum.
Abdul, now the failure of the authorities to establish these rehabilitation centers gave rise to the creation of these illegal centers. The country needs these centers in view of the rising antisocial behaviors of some individuals.
And this one is from Law Alpha. He says all these rehabilitation centers should be brought to the fore in order to ascertain their true operations and activities, as some of them come out more hardened criminals. Some rehabilitation centers are best described as torture centers, taking into consideration the latest experience in Kaduna.
Mike Ayankwo, this is an act of infamy. It's an offense too many that drastic disciplinary action must be taken against the offenders. It's a crime against humanity and typical example of modern-day slavery and mass inhumanity to man. All persons of goodwill in unison should condemn it.
Dele Jack Solomon tweeted, says, sadly, our religious centers are now rehab centers where all manners of atrocities are being committed. The general communities must be sensitized and warned about sending people to these unregistered centers. Some of these operators are running a rehab center as a way of making money for themselves.
Festus Akimboyewa, the images of victims of illegal rehabilitation centers we've seen on television are shocking. and traumatizing. Now, they show fellow Nigerians are exposed to severe malnutrition, inadequate living conditions, medical care, and extreme suffering. Government at all levels must move quickly to end the menace.
And Ishak Abdullahi says, good morning. What are the factors that cause the establishment of these unconventional rehabilitation centers? Government must deal with the root causes of this menace by harmonizing with psychiatric hospitals, as well as advocacy by imams and pastors.
Amobola Babs. Until somebody somewhere is punished for criminal conduct, we will continue to witness all sorts of criminal tendencies. Our judicial system needs a total overhaul. A judicial system that takes forever to deliver justice doesn't speak of a society that yearns for growth.
And this one is from Okwama Chokuma. It says, on this issue, I suggest that government, through the security forces, continue to uncover the illegal rehabilitation centers all over the country and provide phone numbers for the general public to inform them so as to make this exercise more easier and faster.
Titus Monday Knock. Government needs to clamp down on illegal rehabilitation centers and build regulated ones across the country. It's unfortunate that some religious bodies are involved in it.
And this one is from Utolo Sunday. The fact that these centers, so-called illegal rehabilitation centers, are other ways for drug abuse to thrive because there are no standard health facilities in these centers, thereby undermining the essence of the establishment. Governments must do more to uncover these centers.
Now, Ishak Abdullahi, part of the problem is the failure of some government agencies, such as NDLEA and social welfare departments and our community leaders in their responsibilities.
And this one is from Olu Dayomi Gideon. It says, sometime last year I came across such a rehabilitation center here in Ibadan, and I was shocked at how they were muffled together. Although I couldn't ascertain if they are badly treated, the conditions they were in wasn't human either. The government must come up with a solution. Those are the tweets that we have now, and we hope that you continue to send in your tweets and be a part of the conversation. Right now, let's go to our Kaduna Network Center where we have Honorable Suleiman Dabo, if we have him now. All right. Okay, Honorable Suleiman Dabo, how do we ensure, because what we're beginning to see is that parents, just as you said earlier, that we must draw the line between people trying to acquire Islamic education and rehabilitation. Some of these parents are deceived with the fact that when the child comes and gets some form of Islamic education, the child will be better. How do we ensure that parents are not tricked into bringing some of their kids there, probably who have character issues and not necessarily drugs?
Thank you very much. If you look at it from the messages received on your Twitter, you find out that a lot of the messages are coming related to rehab, more or less connected to issue of drugs and alcohol. Now, we have to draw a dissection between the issue of behavioral change an issue of addiction to drugs and alcohol. As I said earlier, most of these local communities, they have their own peculiarities and they have their operational framework, even though they operate illegally. We have to make it very clear, categorically clear, that most of these centers are illegal. But let me put some issues, very important issues. Number one, in Kaduna, we still have a rehabilitation center called Bostel here in the center. But now, when you look at the socio-economic conditions of the parents that see their wards as social problems or menace in the society, how many of them have the financial resources? I'm talking about this Bostel has been in existence for many, many years. It is not a new arrangement, it has been here. But even 40, 45 years ago, a lot of these parents could not afford to bring their kids to these centers. Now, what I'm saying is, their socio-economic conditions cannot give them the opportunity to bring them to such centers. Now, what is the alternative being provided by the government? Virtually none. Virtually none. Now, the government must take a kind of dimension that will be bottom top. Frank Mba made a very important point, and this point is, it's not about the security apparatus of the state coming in to deal with the situation. It's about creating a synergy between the security apparatus and the local communities to come and discuss this issue and provide a way out of it. Because you see, a lot of the local communities, you just mentioned Ibadan. I can guarantee you without any iota of doubt, if a research will be conducted, you'll be shocked to hear the number of these traditional rehab centers that are operating illegally. And most of them have to do, I'm sorry, I don't have the statistics, but I can assure you that most of them, especially in northern Nigeria, have to do with the issue of the behavioral attitude of their kids. For example, just the day before yesterday or so, one of the members from my constituency, even from my ward, called to say, Honorable, we have a lot of young people here, youth, in their ages of 25, 26, even within the neighborhood of my house, my parents' house. They are here, they've become a serious problem in the society, in the world. What are they doing? They are into drugs, but not only the drugs that is disturbing them, but what they are doing now, if some of the visitors within the area park their vehicles, they will go and break the vehicles. Last time, just 3, 4, 5 days, they broke the vehicles, about 2 or 3 vehicles, they broke them and picked some laptops and phones and whatever. So now, a parent that is very poor, his socio-economic condition is worse. Now, what do you expect him to do? He will resort to looking for such traditional illegal rehabilitation centers to seek for a way out. But if there is an arrangement from within the government, I think people will begin to seek to take that as a last resort, as a better platform to deal with the situation. So I think it's very important that we get it right, because sometimes when you tell, this is something that has a history. It has a history. So we have to look at the historical evolution of these rehab centers in the different communities or different localities. When we look at the historical evolution, then we say, okay, something that has history, you cannot come overnight and say, okay, it must go off, because it's like an ideology. Ideologies, you cannot, systems can fail, but ideologies remain there, because already some people were part and parcel. A lot of local people, they see that as, they even see it as legal, because they don't know how to dissect between illegal and legal, because you have to be maybe educated, certain level of education to even differentiate between what is legal and what is illegal. So we have to deal with this issue with highest level of caution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Suleiman Dabo. He's an honorable member of the Kaduna State House of Assembly. Thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. All right, very quickly, Adrian Galali, let's get your closing thoughts on this issue.
Yeah, well, I think we should appreciate that one minor area of disagreement with the honorable member is that I don't think that the young people, for example, in the northern part of the country are different from the young people in the southern part of the country. I think the challenge that exists, that may be a bit more peculiar to the northern region, is, the cultural practices around, for example, many homes that only have a mother, for example, that's present, where you have a father who may not be present, may have several wives, several children with each wife, and given the level of poverty, the wives are now kind of battling, looking for areas where they can essentially reduce the burden in the household and get involved with Al-Majri education, sometimes even rehab centers. So I think ultimately what the long-term solution is, and Mr. President has been very clear about this, is ensuring that through NEC, this administration is going to work closely with the state governors to ensure that 0 through 9 education is made compulsory and free for every Nigerian in every part of the country. Because ultimately, if we educate our girl children very early, then it reduces the likelihood that as they grow, they're going to be taken advantage of in a manner that will lead them down the road of the kinds of activities that we see with, overpopulation and, underserved families, etc. So I think these are the issues and these are the long-term solutions.
All right. Thank you very much, Nigerian Galali. Just wondering, Abdurrahim Shaibu, to get your closing thoughts as well on this subject matter, it would appear that there is probably no silver bullet to solve this issue. What we have seen now is just an exposure, probably for the first time, of a menace that had been undercover for so many years. If there is a history behind it in the north and in the south, if there's poverty behind it, that poverty of ideas, of knowledge, of where to go, and even of cost, assuming there are formal rehab centers of cost, how might we be able to deal with this now, considering the points that DCP Frank Oba made earlier?
Thank you so much. This particular menace or problem actually require of a whole of government and a whole of society approach to have it resolved once and for all. It's very, very pathetic what has been happening. For us, we believe we need to carry out a lot of public enlightenment. The parents have to be highly enlightened because the religious bodies actually, they are supposed to play a positive role in this regard, but then the religious forum is also being used as a negative forum to really encourage and cause this particular problem to escalate. So we are calling on religious homes, particularly the Islamic centers, particularly up north. And let's not limit this issue to the northern part, this representation, because we also believe that a lot of things are going on down south, particularly when it comes to this issue of a baby factory where children are being put on hold and not allowed to go somewhere, and when they deliver babies, those children, the babies are taken out to be sold out by this criminal gang. So we as a law enforcement agency are doing our part because we never allow any criminal element that comes under our radar to go scot-free. Once we are caught, we will deal with you ruthlessly. But then the public has to do their own part, the parents, the guardians, the society generally, to give out information, because all these things are happening under their nose. And if they are not saying anything and they are not speaking out, then it will continue to escalate. So we are so shocked about what has happened, and we believe if we come together to form a synergy with NAPTIP and the Nigerian Immigration Service as well as the Nigerian Police, we have to work together because we have shelters. Once these children are actually rescued, we believe we should be able to receive them, so that we can put them in our shelter and we'll be able to give the psychological, psychosocial support to them so that they can even reveal everything about it. Because right now, a lot of information has been lost. Now they were rescued, we later heard that they have been rented with their parents, and that is the end of the story. Before we know it, another group of criminals will take them again for another reception center. So we believe we need to come in because we have shelters where we can put all these victims and be able to really talk to them, and they can really come back home properly. And talking about all these psychiatric centers that are not being properly regulated, we believe that government needs to do a lot. The state government that are involved, Kaduna State and Katsina State government, really need to sit up, because we are talking about their citizens or their nationals or indigenous. They need to really put up structures in place. Because the idea of that fact that we are poor, I don't like that. It's a poverty of idea. Nigerians are generally not poor. Nigeria as a nation is a rich country. So we need to think outside the box to really resolve all our issues. So we believe the state governments, the state government need to do a lot. Because right now they are not doing enough. That's why it has become so much urgent. Thank you so much.
Okpotu, thank you. Shaibu, thank you very much. But just as we've indicated in the program and through all of the guests, this is not something that's just happening in the north. In the south, we see them as spiritual homes where people are being flogged and chained.
That's correct.
Yes, that's what happens in the south. They are known as spiritual homes. If you raid those places, deliverance centers, you see a lot of them in chains. They're being beaten, and in the name of being delivered from a mental
from the devil.
From the devil, yeah. So that's what's happening.
We understand.
All right, thank you very, very much, Abdurrahim Okpotu. He is a Director Legal, NAPTIP. Thank you for coming on the program.
It's my pleasure.
Nigerian Galali, always a pleasure to have you join us on the program. Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. All right, we'll just go over now